I don't know where you might be watching this podcast from this morning, but here in Northern Illinois on this Martin Luther King Jr. day of 2026, it is cold. It is bitterly cold. In terms of Northern Illinois cold, I'm not sure we would go quite so far as to call this a dangerously cold morning yet, but probably the weatherman would disagree with me on that. As I record this morning, the temperature is a balmy 1 degree, and the feels like temperature is negative 27. Now, that's certainly not the coldest that I've ever felt. For several years of my life, I actually traveled to work every day by walking from our home to a bus. I picked up the bus about 3 blocks away from our home, and then I would walk. I'd take that bus, and then I would get off the bus, and I would walk to the central station to pick up a public transportation train and take that to work. Now, where I picked up the train was about 150 yards or so away from Lake Michigan, right on the waterfront. Talk about cold. Now, I caught the bus about 6:15 in the morning, and I caught the train about 7 o'clock in the morning. In the dead of winter, when the wind was whipping off of the lake, those walks to the bus and to the train, they were brutal. I remember one particular week, we were smack in the middle of one of those Arctic blasts. The high temperatures for the week were predicted to be somewhere around negative 10 to negative 15 degrees. That was the air temperature. Then when you factored in the wind chill, the feels like temperature was something like negative 30 to negative 40 degrees. That was cold. Now, many of you also know that I'm a farm kid. I didn't live on a farm growing up, but I might as well have. My grandparents were both farmers on both sides of my family, and my maternal grandparents were still farming for much of my childhood. I spent many, many weekends and summer weeks helping Grandpa on the farm. One of my most vivid memories of my grandpa in the dead of winter, as he would head out to the barn for the morning chores, was his process of bundling up. Of course, his first layer of defense was putting on his bib overalls and his chambray shirt. But then he would layer up with this old sweater that, Grandma had decided was no longer a church-worthy sweater. Now, in terms of his outerwear, he had a pair of coveralls that he wore. If I remember correctly, I think they were unlined ones. But before he put on those coveralls, he would wear this quilted vest that he had. It boasted a logo from one of the seed dealers or one of the other dealers or vendors that he would use for farm supplies. Vest, coveralls, boots, hat, gloves, and then we were ready to go off to the barn. One of the many hats that I wear here at the church is that I also take care of plowing the snow in our parking lots. We have a really nice John Deere tractor here that makes the job very, very manageable, but there's just one little problem. The tractor doesn't have a cab, and that means that whatever the temperature is outside, well, that's the temperature that I get to work in. So when it's cold, it is cold. It's very important that I be layered up when I'm out plowing snow. Interestingly enough, one of the incredible things about God's Word is that it actually talks to us a little bit about being bundled up and ready when we go out, making sure that our hearts are layered up and ready as we prepare to go out and encounter the chill, the cold of the spiritual attacks that come our way every single day in this world. Making sure that we are spiritually bundled up. That's our topic for today. I am Pastor Jeremy Heitkam. This is Monday Musings for Monday, January 19th, 2026. Now, you've certainly heard these words before from the book of Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 11. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. But I wonder, have you ever considered these words in light of bundling up to head out into the cold? Now take just a moment to stop and think about what it is that the devil is doing. What is it really like when we face the devil? It's like a war. It's like a battle that we face every single moment, every single day. Sometimes facing Satan can put us into the most difficult, terrible places that feel like, that even maybe look like to us a frozen tundra, places of barren nothingness. It can even seem, I think, at some times like we've entered into places where all light has gone away. Darkness has completely covered the face of our particular earth in that moment. In the midst of these moments of sin, it is often a very cold place. So wouldn't it make sense that we should be bundled up? Remember how I mentioned that I have this very specific memory of this farm vest that my grandfather would put on as part of his bundling up to go out to the barn. Well, I have been plowing the snow here in our church parking lots for the better part of 13 years now. For most of those years, I have tried different types of coats to wear with and over my coveralls to keep that winter chill out. Now, many of those have done a pretty good job, but honestly, there are plenty of times where it has still been cold. My wonderful wife bought me one of these battery-powered coats, which actually heats up as I wear it. That has been a lifesaver. But the one thing I think that has made a tremendous difference, well, you probably guessed it, right? I bought myself one of these farm vests like Grandpa had. And you know what? Grandpa was onto something. These vests, they really do make a difference, having that added layer. Being properly dressed for the conditions that we find ourselves in is of critical importance. The weatherman, he very often says that unprotected skin is at the risk of being frostbitten after just a few short minutes of being exposed. Well, guess what? That very same principle applies to our hearts and our souls and in our minds as well. If we leave our hearts and our souls and our minds exposed to Satan for even just a few short minutes, we run the risk of infection. We run the risk of being bitten. Perhaps we might actually call it not infection, but sinfection. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he continues on in chapter 6, verses 13 through 17. He says, "Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground after you have done everything to stand. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, the breastplate of righteousness in place, with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all of this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of Spirit, which is the word of God." Now, clearly, Paul did not live in northern Illinois, so he didn't use cold weather analogies. You maybe don't live in northern Illinois. You might not be as familiar with cold weather analogies, but he did live in a very volatile place, a place that was constantly plagued by war, by this army or that army trying to take over this country or that. He knew the effect of war. If nothing else, he had seen it over and over and over again. And so he thought, if you're going to go out and fight a battle, you've got to be well dressed for it. In Paul's analogy, instead of hats and gloves and coveralls and, vests, right? He says we should put on helmets and breastplates and shields, belts. But they all serve the same purpose, protection. You see, that belt of truth protects us from becoming wobbly, Paul says. We won't get knocked over so easily. When we don't possess the truth, we become wobbly, wishy-washy. But when we're girded up with that belt of truth, we stand firm because we have the truth. Our feet are supposed to be fitted with the readiness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. These are our shoes or our boots. Just the same way you wouldn't want to walk across hot coals or sharp glass or frozen tundra without something protecting your feet. Satan has his snares, his traps everywhere. So what does Paul suggest you wear as shoes? The gospel, the readiness that comes for the walk when we have the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, so in addition to all of this, he says that we should also, take a shield of faith. Paul says we can extinguish the flaming arrows of Satan if we just take our shield of faith. The shield is the oldest form of protection known to mankind. There's never been an army known to exist that didn't employ shields, and they're still in use today. Why is that? Because they work. They are constant, tried, and true. So Paul says, take your shield with you. What is your shield? Your faith. The constant, tried, and true faith. And then he says, don't forget your helmet and your sword, your helmet of salvation, your sword of the Spirit. Salvation is the promise of God that layers over everything else he's given us. It's the culmination of everything he's promised to us. It's what keeps us pressing on and fighting forward. And of course, he says, don't go into battle without a weapon. Take a sword with you, the sword of his Spirit. So, brothers and sisters, yes, it is cold outside today, at least here in northern Illinois. I know some of you might be sitting on a beach in Florida or some other place. Doesn't matter where you are, whether it's hot or cold, there's still a war going on. Satan is on the prowl. You've got to be dressed and ready for whatever it is you're going to encounter on the road that's before you. This journey called life, dressing for that battle is critically important. But, did you also know that in as much as being dressed for the battle is important, sometimes peeling off those layers is important too. Sometimes there are layers that we have to peel back spiritually in order to be ready for the battle. These can be layers, of course, like sin, greed, pride, vanity, dishonesty. But sometimes these can be layers like pain that comes from difficult moments in our past, or disappointment that lingers after betrayal or heartbreak. Sin does attack us, and we have to be dressed and ready to withstand the temptation when it comes our way. But sin also infects us. And when it does infect us, we have got to be ready. We've got to be bundled up, but we also have to be ready to shed some layers in order to move on. Well, here's how Paul ended this part of his letter to the Ephesians on the matter of being bundled up against sin. He says, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all of the Lord's people. Friends, I am praying for you in the midst of the war, the battle that we face every single day. I'm praying for you because it's cold out there. It's sometimes a barren tundra that Satan has for us out there. The weatherman says here, at least in northern Illinois, that this cold snap, this cold, snowy weather could continue for a little while here. I don't know, maybe it's cold where you are, maybe it's not, but this much I know. Whatever the weather is like, wherever you are, whether it's hot or cold, Satan is still on the prowl. You're going to need to be bundled up against his ways, against his tactics, against his temptations. We all need to put on our belts and our shoes and our breastplates and take with us our swords and our helmets every time we set out into this world. Oh, and by the way, here's just my personal opinion. Maybe go on eBay and find yourself a good farm vest. You won't regret that. Have a great week. And if you haven't had a second to click that subscribe button down there, make sure you do that so that every time we go live or one of these podcast episodes posts, you'll get notified. We love joining together with you here on YouTube at Cornerstone Faith Community Church. Our worship channel is CFCC Worship. Look forward to meeting together with you again next week. Have a great week, everybody.